I'm Anna Foster. I'm 38 years old, founder and CEO of Quantum Solutions, a supply chain software company that supports more than 40 businesses across the country. For most of my life, I believed that if I just worked hard enough, if I built something impressive enough, eventually, my family would see me, acknowledge me, respect me. I was wrong. Just last week, I went to my brother Michael's wedding. It was held at the Blake family estate. Yes, that Blake family. David Blake is a real estate mogul worth billions. His daughter, Lauren, was marrying my brother. It was supposed to be a new beginning for everyone. For me, it was the moment I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally be seen for who I really am. I wore a custom-tailored navy dress, elegant, professional, confident. My date was Ethan Chen, a respected venture capitalist. I walked in with my head held high, thinking, this time will be different. The estate was stunning. White orchids, champagne fountains, and guests in designer gowns and tuxedos mingling under the Long Island sun. It felt like a scene from a movie. But then, everything fell apart. I wasn't seated at the family table. Not even with close friends. Not in the garden, or the terrace, or anywhere near the main reception. They put me in the kitchen. The actual kitchen. Next to the staff. At a folding table dressed with a wrinkled tablecloth. No flowers. No name card. No seat at the table, literally. I found Lauren and asked, was this a mistake? She smiled, took a sip of her champagne, and said, no mistake. We had to make room for the real business partners. That's when it hit me. To them, I wasn't family. I wasn't a partner. I was an afterthought. So let me ask you, what would you do if your own family treated you like you didn't matter? As for me, I decided it was time they saw just how visible I could be. Because if they won't give you a seat at the table, you build your own. Growing up in New Haven, Connecticut, my brother Michael and I were close, at least in the beginning. We were only 2 years apart. Summers were filled with building forts in the backyard and riding our bikes down Oak Street until the streetlights flicked on. Winters meant snowball fights and sledding down Foster Hill, always with Michael in the lead and me trailing right behind, laughing until my cheeks hurt. Our parents, Patricia and George Foster, were good, decent people, but like many families, they had a way of seeing their children through very different lenses. Michael was the golden boy from the start. Athletic, charming, confident. He followed in Dad's footsteps, varsity football, loyal fraternity brother, always the center of attention. He got a standing ovation at his high school graduation for scoring the game-winning touchdown in the state semifinals. Me? I was the smart one. The girl who brought home straight A's, who stayed up late building robots out of spare parts from the garage. I joined the coding club before coding was cool, competed in debate tournaments, and quietly aced the SATs. But no one ever clapped for a science fair trophy. I remember one moment so vividly. I was 15, and I had just won first place at a regional coding competition, beating out students 2 years older. I came home beaming, the medal still warm in my hand. I found Mom in the kitchen and held it up proudly. She smiled politely, wiping her hands on a dish towel. That's nice, sweetheart. Did you see Michael's write-up in the paper this morning? The one about the game? That was the first time I felt it. That creeping realization that no matter what I accomplished, it would never shine quite as bright as Michael scoring a touchdown. Still, I pushed forward. I graduated valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to MIT, and dove headfirst into the world of tech. I worked grueling hours at a Boston startup, often sleeping on the office couch and living off cheap takeout. When the company folded unexpectedly, I didn't quit. I took what I'd learned, scraped together a small business loan, and launched my own venture, Quantum Solutions. For the first 2 years, Quantum was just me and a second-hand laptop in a studio apartment. I pitched to investors who barely returned my emails, hustled at every networking event I could find, and coded deep into the night until my wrists ached. I'd call home now and then. "Hey Mom, I signed my first client." "Dad, we're hiring 2 full-time engineers." But their responses were always the same, polite, distant, dismissive. "That's great, honey. Are you still eating enough? Your brother just closed a deal with the city. He's doing so well at Foster Construction." It was like they couldn't hear me over the sound of their pride for him. What made it sting even more was how easy everything seemed for Michael. After college, he stepped into a management role at the family business, already groomed to take it over one day. He never had to explain his worth, our father made sure everyone knew it. And then came the Blake connection. Michael met Lauren at a charity golf tournament. Their whirlwind romance quickly turned into vacation photos in Santorini, custom monograms, and engagement announcements in glossy print. The Fosters, a solid middle-class construction family, were now rubbing shoulders with one of the richest names in East Coast real estate. Suddenly, my parents were attending black-tie galas and country club dinners they used to scoff at. My mother gushed about Lauren's pedigree, her designer taste, her father's influence. What they didn't gush about? The $30 million contract Quantum Solutions signed with Blake Enterprises, completely on merit. I didn't use Michael's name. I didn't even know Blake Enterprises was scouting new tech partners. Their operations lead, Eleanor Wright, found me through an industry expo and contacted my team after a presentation. 3 months of meetings, audits, and demos later, we closed the deal. It was our largest contract ever, and it put us on the map. When I told my parents, I remember the silence on the line. "That's nice," Mom finally said. "Did you get your invitation to Michael and Lauren's engagement party?" "It's at the Blake estate. David has his own golf course." That was it. No congratulations. No pride. Just a redirect back to Michael's shining moment. It wasn't jealousy I felt, it was exhaustion. Years of being the other child. The quiet achiever. The one who never needed help but always had to prove she deserved a seat at the table. So yes, when I showed up at that wedding, I wasn't just wearing a beautiful dress, I was carrying decades of unspoken frustration. I was ready to finally be seen. But what I didn't realize was just how far my family, and Lauren, would go to make sure I stayed invisible. The day of the wedding was bright and breezy. The kind of perfect early summer day people write poems about. The Blake estate was even more extravagant in person, 30 acres of manicured gardens, rolling lawns, and a mansion straight out of an architectural magazine. Ethan and I pulled up in my midnight blue Tesla, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe this was the day my parents would finally introduce me proudly. Maybe Michael would recognize what I'd built. Maybe, just maybe, they'd realize I belonged. The valet opened my door, offering a practiced smile. "Welcome to the Blake Foster wedding, ma'am." As we stepped onto the gravel path lined with orchids, Ethan leaned over and whispered, "This place looks like Versailles." "It's definitely not New Haven anymore," I said, half laughing, half bracing myself. Inside, the guests were already sipping champagne and nibbling from silver trays. String music floated through the air. The decorations were absurdly elegant, white silk tents, crystal chandeliers, and custom-engraved everything. It was less a wedding and more a corporate branding event for the Blake family. My mother found us within minutes. "Anna!" You're here, she chirped, wearing a pale pink dress that I had heard about in 3 separate phone calls. And who is this? Mom, this is Ethan Chen. Ethan, this is my mother, Patricia Foster. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Foster, Ethan said, offering a warm handshake. She smiled politely, eyes scanning his shoes and watch, subtle but unmistakable. Then, with a flick of her hand, she said, Your father is by the bar with David Blake. You should come say hello. No mention of how I looked. No, we're proud of you. Just, follow me. Dad barely looked up when we approached. There's my girl, he said, giving me a one-armed hug. Then, more animated, he turned to Ethan. And you are? After introductions, David Blake's voice boomed behind me. Anna Foster. So you're the brains behind Quantum. I turned. He was tall, silver-haired, confident, the kind of man who expected the world to come to him. I am. We're excited to be working with Blake Enterprises. Well, he said, Eleanor can't stop singing your praises. Says your software's already improving our logistics. I smiled, but before I could respond, my mother jumped in. Oh, Anna's always been our little computer genius, she said, the tone syrupy sweet, like I was a toddler who could count to 10. I bit back the urge to correct her. David looked confused. Wait, Foster? You're Michael's sister? I nodded. Funny, he never mentioned that his sister ran the tech company we just signed a $30 million deal with. Of course he hadn't. That's interesting, David muttered, clearly catching on to the omission. I thought maybe, just maybe, this revelation might shift the tone. But instead, it passed like an awkward cough in a crowded room. Someone changed the subject. The moment passed. Still, I held on to hope. As guests began moving toward the ceremony space, I called out to Michael. Hey, I said, hugging him quickly. Just wanted to say congrats. Thanks, sis, he said, glancing over his shoulder. It's chaos around here. Tiffany's losing her mind about seating charts and rain backups. Need help? Nah, we're good. Just, listen, about the reception. There were a few last-minute changes, but it's all sorted. I paused. Okay. He waved it off. See you out there. A red flag waved in the back of my mind, but I ignored it. The ceremony was textbook perfect. Lauren floated down the aisle like a Vogue bride, all sleek lines and practiced grace. Michael looked dashing in his tux, though his eyes rarely left the ground. The vows were well written, probably by a PR rep. Guests dabbed at their eyes. A string quartet played softly as they were pronounced husband and wife. Afterward, we followed the crowd toward the reception tent. It was massive, air-conditioned, with golden chairs and centerpieces taller than a toddler. Waitstaff carried trays of champagne like choreography. I approached the event coordinator, a young woman with a tablet and a headset. Hi, Anna Foster. Can you tell me where we're seated? She smiled, tapped a few buttons, and then paused. Foster. Foster, Her brow furrowed. I waited. Ethan stood beside me, silent but alert. Oh. Here we go, she said finally. Anna Foster, +1. You're at table O. She glanced at me quickly. If you'll follow me, please. We didn't walk toward the main area. We walked past it. Through a side door. Down a hallway. My heels clicked against tile instead of polished wood. The music grew fainter. We passed catering staff, prep tables, racks of dishes. Finally, she opened a door. We were in the kitchen. A folding table had been set up in the corner, haphazardly draped in a white cloth. 2 chairs. No decor. You can't be serious, I said, blinking. I'm so sorry, she said quietly. The bride made last-minute changes. Important guests needed space. I'm a guest, I said sharply. And a business partner. My company is providing the system your father-in-law just praised 5 minutes ago. She looked lost. I wasn't told that. I'm just following instructions. That's when Lauren appeared, gliding in with a glass of champagne and a smile like a blade. Is there a problem? She asked, saccharine sweet. You seated me in the kitchen, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm Michael's sister. We had to prioritize business associates, she replied. I'm sure you understand. I am a business associate. Her smile thinned. Scott approved the seating this morning. He knows where everyone's sitting. It felt like a slap. Not a mistake. Not a miscommunication. A choice. A decision that I didn't matter. Ethan stepped forward. We'll be joining the main reception. Lauren's eyes narrowed. The help eats in the kitchen, she said softly. You should feel right at home. And there it was. The contempt. The dismissal. The confirmation that this wasn't just a social slip, it was a power move. In that moment, something in me snapped. I turned to Ethan and whispered, I need a minute. He nodded. I'll wait outside. As the door closed behind him, I stood in that kitchen, surrounded by noise and steam and the clatter of silver trays, and realized something that should have been obvious years ago. They didn't see me. Not really. But I did. And that would be enough. I stood there, motionless, in the corner of the kitchen, heat from the open stoves radiating across my back, the scent of truffle oil and rosemary heavy in the air. Around me, staff moved quickly, professionally, pretending not to notice the woman in a designer dress standing next to the garbage bins with tears threatening to spill over. I swallowed hard. No one was coming to fix this. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point. For too long, I'd waited for someone else to change things. For my parents to speak up. For Michael to finally acknowledge what I'd built. For my family to give me permission to be proud. But now, in a kitchen full of strangers, I understood, if I wanted to be seen, I had to stop asking. I had to act. I pulled my phone from my clutch, hands still trembling slightly. One notification blinked on the screen, a voicemail from Eleanor Wright, the operations director at Blake Enterprises. I hit play. Hi Anna, just confirming our meeting next week to begin Phase 2 implementation. Also, just wanted to let you know the first payment on the contract hit this morning, $30 million, right on schedule. Talk soon. I stared at the screen. $30 million. 30 million reasons I shouldn't be sitting in a kitchen like an afterthought. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. When I opened them, I wasn't the same woman who had walked into this wedding hoping to be noticed. I was Anna Foster, CEO of Quantum Solutions, and I had some decisions to make. I stepped into the hallway, finding Ethan leaning against the wall, still holding 2 glasses of champagne. He looked at me carefully. You okay? I took 1 glass from his hand and downed half of it in one smooth motion. I am now, I said. Let's go. Where? He asked. To the main tent, I replied, smoothing my dress with deliberate precision. I'm done hiding in kitchens. As we walked, Ethan gave me space but stayed close. I was grateful. His presence grounded me. The reception was in full swing, guests laughing, dancing, sipping, toasting. Nobody noticed us re-enter. Nobody cared. Perfect. Because I wasn't there for applause. I was there to send a message. I scanned the room until I found the head table. Michael sat between Lauren and David Blake, flanked by executives in tailored suits and manicured smiles. I spotted two men I'd met briefly during early negotiations. One was Gerald Winters from Apex Investments. The other was Thomas Harrington, CEO of Coastal Development. Blake was clearly pitching something, probably a combined venture with Foster Construction, now that he had a shiny new son-in-law to play with. I walked straight toward them. No hesitation. No doubt. The music softened as the band transitioned songs, and the moment I stepped up to the table, I felt every eye turn toward me. David Blake looked up first. His smile faltered. "Anna," he said slowly, "we were just discussing logistics software, funny timing." "Actually," I said calmly, "I'd like to clarify something about that software." Michael's head turned, and when he saw me, a flicker of alarm crossed his face. "We can talk later," he muttered quickly. "We're kind of in the middle of something." "Are you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're using my work to climb a ladder I built." A hush fell over the table. Thomas Harrington leaned back in his chair, curious. David cleared his throat. "Anna, let's keep this professional." I said evenly. "Which is why I'd like to formally inform you that I'm terminating Quantum's contract with Blake Enterprises." Michael blanched. Lauren choked on her champagne. David froze. "What?" he asked. "You heard me," I said, taking out my phone and dialing. "Gregory, it's Anna. Cancel the Blake contract, effective immediately. Notify legal and prepare the paperwork." The table was dead silent. Lauren leaned forward, voice tight. "You can't do that. We've already implemented your system across 5 divisions." I slipped my phone back into my clutch. "Then I suggest you back it up." David finally found his voice. "You're canceling a $30 million deal over a seating chart?" I smiled, cool and composed. "No. I'm canceling it because this seating chart was just the tip of the iceberg. You see, David, when your team wanted cutting-edge tech, you called me. But when your daughter planned her wedding, I was treated like the help. That tells me everything I need to know about how this partnership will go." He stared at me, jaw tight. "You could have talked to me privately," he said. "I tried that. For years," I replied. "With my family. With Michael. With people who only see value when it comes in a tuxedo or with the right last name. But I'm done whispering in corners. You all made it very clear where you thought I belonged. So now, I'm showing you exactly who I am." I turned to walk away, but then paused. "Oh, and if you're looking for a new tech partner, you might want to call Coastal or Apex. They've been following my work closely." I met Thomas Harrington's eyes and saw him smirk. Then I walked. I didn't look back. Ethan caught up to me halfway across the dance floor. "That," he said, "was the most professional takedown I've ever seen." I took a long breath. The music swelled again behind us. "For the first time in years," I said quietly, "I don't care if they clap." Because this time, I was walking away on my own terms. We had barely reached the valet stand when I heard my name shouted across the gravel. "Anna! Stop right there, young lady." I closed my eyes. I didn't need to turn around to know that voice. It was my father. George Foster, in a suit that didn't quite fit the occasion, was charging toward me, his face flushed from either rage or too many cocktails, probably both. Behind him trailed my mother, her makeup slightly smeared, eyes darting nervously. Ethan instinctively stepped closer, protective without being overbearing. I stood my ground. "Yes, Dad?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snapped, coming to a stop just feet away. "Do you have any idea what kind of scene you just caused? Richard Blake is furious. Your brother is humiliated. Your mother's been crying for 20 minutes. Sounds like a successful wedding," I replied dryly. "Don't be smart with me, Anna," he barked. "You canceled a $30 million contract because of a seating mix-up." "Really?" "It wasn't a mix-up," I said calmly. "It was intentional. Michael approved it. Lauren executed it. You all knew about it and said nothing." He waved that off. "So what? It's a party. You don't get to dictate where you sit. That's basic etiquette." Ethan stepped forward, voice steady. "With all due respect, sir, your daughter is the CEO of a company that Blake Enterprises sought out. She wasn't asking for special treatment, she deserved professional respect." Dad turned to him, his tone sharp. "And who the hell are you?" "This is Ethan Chen," I said. "And unlike most people here today, he sees me." Dad scoffed. "You've always been sensitive, Anna. Always blowing things out of proportion. That's why you're alone. Why you've always been difficult." I felt something inside me shift. Not crack. Break free. "I'm not difficult," I said, voice trembling but firm. "I'm driven. I'm successful. And I'm tired of shrinking myself to make you more comfortable." Behind him, my mother whispered, "George, stop." But he didn't. He pressed on, voice rising. "You've just jeopardized your brother's future. Do you know what this means for Foster Construction? Do you even care?" There it was. The truth. It had never been about me. It had never even been about the company. It was about Michael, as always. "No," I said. "What I care about is protecting a company I built from nothing." "You want to talk about jeopardy? Imagine what happens when my team finds out we're partnering with people who treat the founder like a second-class guest." "You're being dramatic," he hissed. "No," I said, quieter now, dead serious. "I'm being honest. For the first time in my life." My mother stepped forward. "Anna, please. Michael's devastated. Richard is threatening to pull their funding. Tiffany is hysterical." "I didn't ruin this wedding," I said. "Tiffany did. Michael did. You did, by choosing silence over support." Just then, Michael appeared. His tuxedo was rumpled now, tie loosened, hair a mess. He looked like a man who'd just watched his house catch fire with no hose in sight. "Van," he said, trying to sound calm. "We need to talk. There's nothing left to say." "Come on," he pleaded. "You couldn't just sit where you were told? For one day? Just once, not make everything about you?" I stared at him, stunned. "Everything about me? Michael, my entire existence has been an afterthought in this family. My wins were cute. My company was a hobby. And when I finally land the biggest contract of my life, with your in-laws, no less, you seat me in the kitchen. And I'm the one making it about me?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Ethan's hand touched the small of my back gently. "You don't need to explain yourself to anyone. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even my father seemed unsure of what to say. And then Lauren stormed out of the tent. Her hair was no longer perfectly pinned. Her makeup was smudged, her expression twisted with fury. She pointed at me like I'd set fire to the reception tent. "This is all your fault," she hissed. "You've embarrassed us. You humiliated my family on the most important day of our lives." I blinked. "No, Lauren. You did that when you decided I wasn't good enough to sit at your table." "I had to protect my brand," she shrieked. "You don't get it. Your company made me look bad. Everyone kept talking about you, not me. And there it was. The real reason. Insecurity disguised as arrogance. Fear masquerading as control." "I see," I said slowly. "So instead of rising to meet me, you tried to cut me down." Her nostrils flared. "You're just jealous." I laughed, genuinely. "Of what?" "A woman who had to marry her way into power, who can't stand the idea that her husband's sister built something on her own?" "No, Lauren. I'm not jealous. I'm just done." David Blake appeared then, drawn by the noise, flanked by 2 investors. His expression was unreadable. "Miss Foster," he said, voice low. "Can we speak privately?" "No," I replied. "We had our chance. I'm not here to renegotiate. I'm here to walk away." He nodded once, slowly. "I misjudged you. People tend to do that when they're used to women being silent." And with that, I turned. We walked back to the Tesla. Ethan opened the door for me like it was the most natural thing in the world. As I slid inside, I caught one last glimpse of my family, frozen in place, uncertain, unraveling. But I wasn't unraveling. For the first time in a long time, I was free. By the time I got home that night, my phone had already vibrated itself into exhaustion. Calls. Voicemails. Emails. Some from Blake Enterprises. Some from my mother, 8 missed calls. 2 from Michael. 1, surprisingly, from David Blake himself. But I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I changed into sweatpants, made a cup of tea, and opened my laptop. Not to scroll social media or vent in a journal, but to send a single email. Subject line: Contract termination, Quantum Solutions and Blake Enterprises. I CC'd legal, operations, and my executive assistant. There was no emotion in the wording. No venom. No theatrics. Just a clear statement of facts: the contract would be dissolved, the system access suspended, and my team would assist with a clean transition. I hit send. The room was quiet. My hand hovered over the keyboard for a moment, as if it expected something to happen. Some wave of guilt or second-guessing. But it never came. Instead, I felt peaceful. Not relieved. Not triumphant. Just deeply settled. The next morning, I arrived at the Quantum Solutions office early. I wanted to be the first one in. To my surprise, I wasn't. Gregory Phillips, our COO, was already in the conference room, sipping coffee and flipping through our project schedule. "You've been busy," he said without looking up. I set my bag down. "You heard. I think half the tech world heard. You canceled our biggest contract in the middle of a wedding reception." I winced slightly. That part wasn't exactly planned. He closed the folder and looked at me, eyes steady. "You want to tell me what happened?" So I did. I told him everything, from the childhood favoritism to the seating chart slap in the face. I told him about standing in that kitchen, making the decision, and delivering it straight to David Blake's table. He didn't interrupt. He didn't react. When I finished, he nodded. "I'd like to say I'm surprised," he said, "but honestly, I've been waiting for this version of you to show up." I blinked. "What version?" "The one who stops asking for permission." That landed like a truth I wasn't ready to admit out loud. "I know what we lost," I said, finally sitting down. $30 million is a lot to walk away from." He waved a hand. "We'll get over it. We were too reliant on one contract anyway. This forces us to diversify." As if on cue, my assistant Sarah poked her head in. "Thomas Harrington is on line 1, she said. "And Gerald Winters just emailed. They both want meetings this week." Gregory and I exchanged a glance. "Set them up," I said. "Let's see what happens." By the end of that week, we had 3 new partnership proposals in the works, 2 of them larger than the original Blake deal. More surprising, though, was the tone of the conversations. The executives weren't just interested in the software, they were interested in me. They'd heard what I did. How I handled myself. How I stood up for my company in a room full of people who underestimated me. They respected it. And more than that, they trusted it. Sometimes, integrity is louder than any sales pitch. A week after the wedding, I got a text from Michael. "Lunch. Just us. Please." Part of me wanted to ignore it. Let the silence speak for me. But the bigger part, the one that had always hoped he'd grow into something better, responded. "Tomorrow. Noon. Luciano's." He arrived early. Sat at the table like someone about to deliver bad news, or beg for forgiveness. I couldn't tell which. "Thanks for coming," he said when I walked in. I nodded, sliding into the seat across from him. For a few seconds, we just sat there in awkward silence. Then he exhaled sharply. "I messed up." "You think?" He winced. "Okay. I really messed up." I let the words hang in the air. He needed to sit with them. "I knew Lauren moved you off the main chart," he continued. "I didn't fight her on it." "Why?" He looked ashamed. "She said it made her look bad, having you there. Said it was her day. That it would shift the spotlight. And you let her." I didn't want to rock the boat. Not the night before the wedding. I told myself it didn't matter. That you'd understand. "I always understand," I said quietly. "That's the problem." He swallowed hard. "You were right. You've always been right. About how they treat you. About how I let it happen. And the contract? That's on me too. I should have told David who you were. I should have connected the dots. I didn't want him comparing us." There it was. The fear. The inferiority complex hiding behind years of handshakes and football trophies. I studied him, wondering if this version of Michael, the one sitting across from me, vulnerable and self-aware, was real. "I'm not asking you to fix it," I said. "You can't." He nodded. "But I am asking you to stop pretending I'm not here. I'm not the quiet little sister anymore. I don't need you to protect me, but I do need you to stop erasing me." "I hear you," he said. "I really do." "Then act like it." He reached across the table. I hesitated, then took his hand. We sat there, not fixed, not fully reconciled, but finally, real. And that was a start. 2 days after lunch with Michael, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Anna Foster speaking. There was a pause on the other end. Anna, this is Diana Foster. Your aunt. I nearly dropped my phone. Aunt Diana? I said, stunned. I haven't. I thought. You thought I'd vanished, she finished, her voice calm but tinged with something deeper. That's what your father wanted everyone to think. I sank into the nearest chair. I haven't heard from you in 20 years? Try 23, she said, with a soft laugh. I've been watching from afar. Reading about quantum. You've done well, Anna. Very well. Thank you, I replied, still trying to process what was happening. Why are you calling now? I heard what happened at the wedding, she said. And then I heard what you did. And I thought, finally, a foster woman stood up for herself. The words hit me harder than I expected. I had never thought of myself as a part of any larger pattern. But as Aunt Diana continued speaking, a generational thread began to unfold. I built an interior design firm in the 1980s, she said. Before it was fashionable. Before there were podcasts and incubators and girl boss t-shirts. I pitched to banks who wouldn't shake my hand. I landed contracts with hotels and private estates, and still, your grandfather gave the entire family business to your father. My throat tightened. I always wondered why you left, I said quietly. Because I had to, she replied. Because staying would have meant watching everything I built be diminished, minimized, explained away. And I refused. There was a pause. That's why I called you, Anna. Because what you did at that wedding, that wasn't just about you. It was about breaking a pattern. About telling this family, and the world, that our value doesn't need to be filtered through a man's title or a family name. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I didn't know you were watching, I whispered. I never stopped, she said gently. We talked for nearly an hour. She told me stories about growing up with my father, about the same dismissiveness, the same favoritism, the same battles I'd fought on a different stage. It was like seeing my own history in a different light, suddenly illuminated by someone who'd lived it before me. Before we hung up, she said something I'll never forget. You weren't just making a business decision, Anna. You were making history, for the women in our family who never got to. That call changed something in me. I'd spent years climbing the ladder, sometimes out of hunger, sometimes out of spite, but I'd never stopped to look behind me. I never thought of myself as someone who could pull others up. But that changed too. The next Monday, I held a company-wide meeting and announced the launch of a new initiative, Project Visible, a mentorship and leadership development program for women in tech, especially those who came from families, cultures, or communities where ambition wasn't always encouraged. Our first cohort would be 20 women. I would personally mentor 5 of them. Because, I said during the meeting, if I had someone like Aunt Diana when I was 23, it might not have taken me this long to realize my own worth. The response was overwhelming. Emails. LinkedIn messages. A thank you note from a junior developer who said she finally felt like she could be honest about her goals. One message stuck with me most. It came from a woman named Rachel, a 29-year-old software engineer from Kansas City who'd grown up in a conservative household where she was told, tech is for boys. I've followed your story since the Blake contract story made the news, she wrote. At first I was angry, how could someone give up $30 million over a wedding? But then I realized, you weren't giving anything up. You were taking something back. And you helped me see I've been invisible in my own life too. I applied for your program today. I hope I get in. I read her message 3 times. Then forwarded it to Aunt Diana. She replied with a single line, "See? The ripples are already spreading." In the weeks that followed, the media picked up the story. Not all of it was kind. Some headlines read, "Tech CEO cancels deal over wedding drama. Too emotional for business." But others understood. When respect matters more than revenue. The CEO who walked away, and walked taller because of it. I didn't respond to the press. I didn't need to. The real work was happening in boardrooms, video calls, and quiet mentoring sessions where women asked hard questions. How do I demand respect without being labeled difficult? How do I build a business when my family doesn't believe in me? How do I know when it's time to walk away? I didn't always have perfect answers. But I had stories. And sometimes, that was enough. One night, as Ethan and I sat on the balcony, sipping wine and watching the city lights, he asked, "Do you ever regret it? Walking away from Blake?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "No," I said. Because walking away from them was the first time I walked toward myself. He reached for my hand. "That's the version of you I fell for." And in that quiet moment, under a sky full of stars, I realized. This wasn't just about business. This was about becoming. And I wasn't finished yet. The invitation arrived in a cream-colored envelope, addressed in my mother's careful handwriting. Inside was a card, handwritten again, not printed. "Dinner at home. Just the family. Your father has something he wants to say. Tuesday at 6:30. Please come. Mom." I stared at it for a while. Ethan noticed the change in my expression. "What's that?" I handed it to him without a word. He read it and nodded slowly. "You want to go?" I shrugged. Part of me wants to throw it away. Part of me wants to see what something he thinks is worth saying. "Then go," he said. "But only if you're walking into that house as the woman you are now. Not the daughter they remember." Tuesday came. I wore a sharp navy blazer, not unlike the dress I'd worn to the wedding, but with more edge, more clarity. I didn't go to impress anyone. I went to honor myself. Ethan came with me. My parents' house hadn't changed. Same white shutters, same porch swing, same hydrangeas that I helped plant when I was 12. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, looking older than I remembered. Her makeup was light, her expression guarded. "Anna," she said. "Hi, Mom." She looked at Ethan. "Welcome." To her credit, she didn't look him up and down this time. Inside, the table was set for 6. Michael and Lauren were already there. Michael looked sheepish, Lauren looked stiff. But she didn't say anything. Maybe she'd learned something. Maybe not. Aunt Diana was there too. That surprised me. She was seated at the far end of the table, calm and composed, sipping water like she owned the place. When she saw me, she smiled warmly. "Nice to see you again, Anna." "You too," I said softly. Dad entered from the kitchen a few moments later, drying his hands on a towel. For a while, we just ate in silence. The food was good, roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes. Comfort food. Familiar, grounding. Then Dad cleared his throat and stood. "I owe you an apology," he said, eyes on me. I waited. "For years," he began, "I didn't see you." "Not really. I saw Michael. I saw the business. I saw what I understood. And when you started building something of your own, didn't know what to do with it. Or with you." He looked at the table. I thought I was protecting you by steering you toward what I knew. But really, I was protecting myself, from feeling useless, from feeling like I didn't understand my own daughter. My mother reached over and touched his hand. He continued. The night of the wedding, I was angry. Not because you embarrassed us, but because you made me face something I didn't want to admit, that you'd surpassed everything I thought a foster could be. He looked back up. You didn't ruin the wedding. We did, by refusing to make space for you. My throat tightened. And I want to say, not as your father, but as a man who's been blind for too long, I'm proud of you, Anna. Deeply proud. Not because of your company or your money. But because you demanded the kind of respect I should have given you all along. Silence settled like snow across the table. Lauren looked away. Michael swallowed hard. Aunt Diana smiled, a quiet triumph in her eyes. I let the silence hang, then finally spoke. Thank you, I said. That means more than you probably realize. But, I added, I need you to understand, this dinner doesn't undo everything. There's still distance. There's still work. I know, he said. And I'm ready to do it. My mother finally spoke. Me too. Michael looked at me. Me three. Lauren didn't say anything, but for once, she didn't interrupt. Aunt Diana raised her glass. To progress, she said. We clinked glasses. 3 weeks later, I stood on a stage in San Francisco at a leadership summit. The ballroom was filled with over 500 women in business, tech, finance, and innovation. My keynote was titled, Building the Seat When You're Denied One. I walked to the podium slowly, confidently. 3 months ago, I was invited to my brother's wedding. I had just signed the biggest contract of my company's life. I thought I would finally be seen, acknowledged, not just as a sibling or a daughter, but as a leader. I paused. Instead, I was seated in the kitchen. A ripple of murmurs. But something happened in that moment. A truth I'd spent my whole life avoiding hit me square in the chest. I didn't need their recognition to prove my worth. I needed my own. The room was silent. I walked away from that contract. And people said I was reckless. Emotional. That I let pride cost me millions. I looked across the audience. But what they didn't understand is this, walking away from a table where you're not respected isn't a loss. It's a declaration. Scattered applause. And in walking away, I created something better. A company with integrity. A team that values each other. A mentorship program that's already helping women just like me reclaim their voice. Louder applause now. I'm not telling you this to impress you. I'm telling you because you need to know, it's possible. You can walk away. You can demand more. And when you do, the world will start to meet you where you stand. Standing ovation. I smiled, not because they clapped, but because this time. I did too. That night, back at the hotel, I sat on the balcony with my laptop. I opened a blank document and typed. Dear Rachel. Because every story I write now, every contract I sign, every mint I guide, it all begins the same way. With a seat I built for myself. And now, I'm making room for others.